r/ask Reddit. Akumaji says. People who were homeless once, how did you get your life on the track back? Prek Dropout says. My turning point came unexpectedly. One cold night, I was approached by a kind-hearted volunteer from a local homeless organization in my town's version of Skid Row. She offered me a warm meal and, more importantly, a listening ear. It was the first time in months that I felt seen and heard. This encounter led me to a local shelter where I found not just refuge, but a community that supported me. With their help, I started to rebuild my life. I volunteered at the shelter, which kept me busy and gave me a sense of purpose. I was eventually able to secure a part-time job through the shelter's network, which was a major stepping stone for me. The job provided enough stability to rent a small room. It's been a journey of small steps, but each one has been a victory. I've realized the power of community support and the strength that comes from within when you're pushed to the brink. Sbrown100 says. Congrats on all those steps. Glad you were able to find the strength to carry on. Physical Thought 389 says. Donated plasma to feed the kids until I got a job and worked my way up. Twice. Gotta Chondek says. I slept in my car next to work and kept on going. Odd stands for says. Yes. Homeless but have a job. You've never wanted to go to work so bad in your life. Running water, restroom, pretend everything is okay for most of the day. Gotta Chondek says. Yeah, pretty much. I would shower at anyone's house that was nice enough to let me. I had all my stuff in a storage unit and whatever clothes I could squeeze in the car with me. It was pretty rough. Punchbud says. I joined the army. Through a lot of bad decisions and bad luck, I found myself couch surfing with friends and sleeping in my car. I was in school when this happened, so I would park my car in a grocery store parking lot, walk to school, and shower in the men's gym. Eventually it started getting too cold for me to sleep in the car. Where I live, the snowfall is measured in feet, not inches, so I was brainstorming how the hell I was going to get out of this mess. Because once you fall into that hole, it's almost impossible to get out without help. So I just said frick it and walked into an army recruitment station across the street from campus. Of course, that was 2000, so joke was on me. S058 says. The timing sucked lol. I was born only 2 years later from when you joined, and I'm also in the army now. If you could summarize your time in the military with one word or sentence, how would you summarize it? Respect. Punchbud says. It was actually pretty interesting. When I was a little kid, I always thought the army seemed sort of cool thanks to bozo action movies of the 80s. I was a college kid when I enlisted and had a passing interest in global politics. And while the idea of there being a possibility of going to war was in the back of my mind, the reality, in my mind, was that by 2000 America hadn't really been in a major conflict since Vietnam, and it sort of seemed like our long-term military policy was simply to bomb the shit out of our enemies. The idea of a ground war seemed old-fashioned and not something I would ever see. Anyway, I ended up deployed a few times to Iraq during and after the invasion. And while it was pretty rough at times, I learned that my personality is uniquely suited to being in a war. I'm not a mean or callous person or really dark or anything, but I'm also not overly emotional or sensitive. So I came out of my military experience more or less the same as I was before I enlisted. Sure, I became a lot more confident and I learned good leadership skills and the like, but I don't have any sort of PTSD or any other issues related to my time overseas. And nowadays I barely register the fact that I'm a war veteran. It's really not a part of who I am as a person these days. Kingpin DXB says. I was raised in a very religious home and I hated every moment of it. So I was given an ultimatum at 18 years old, either follow and set an example for the siblings or leave. I decided to leave. I found myself on the street, sleeping on park benches, friends, coaches, and mostly a forest behind where I used to live. I immediately got myself a job at a grocery store, and I was so broke, I used to walk to work the first 2 weeks until I got a paycheck. It takes me 2 hours each way to get to work and back to where I slept. Eventually, my mom's friend has been secretly spotting me drinking water out of their garden hose at night, and she busted me one night, and she burst into tears. She asked me if I was into drugs. I wasn't. Alcohol. But I wasn't either. I told her I found myself kicked out because I don't share my family's religious belief. She helped me get back on my feet, rent an apartment, worked 2 jobs, got myself into university. At 24 years old I started working on a software, and at 28 years old I sold my company for a very large sum. Now at 32 years old, I'm living such an amazing life with my wife, but the fear of ending up homeless still haunts me. My family tried to get in touch with me and ask me for financial help. Matonia says, the absolute gall of those people. Glad you found your own family, because those hypocritical godbethrers ain't it. I'm so mad on behalf of you and your past self. r/ask Reddit. Just Thoretta Snoop 13 says, what are some subtle signs that your married boss might be secretly involved with a coworker? Agenting Kerbal says, that's business you don't want to be a part of. Vegasmatus says, yeah, next day you go to work, you mind your own business. Icekandaguy says, sudden interest in hanging out and spending more time with the team after work. Uncle Axel says, first freelancer here. Thick Worry 5028 says, the new department supervisor is Becky. Becky is 19 years old, no experience, no education, but spends an hour a day in the boss's office with the door locked. Even Thorism 76 says, Becky also had rug burns on her knees. Content Bullfrog 536 says, Becky wears knee pads now, she's also getting her braces off in 2 weeks. 306 Knees says, his penis is found inside of the coworker. Scumbanald says, they arrive in the same car. Jusma Bri says, too much eye contact. Unicorn Picnic says, lol. That reminds me of something. I worked at a restaurant and I was sitting and doing side work with a coworker, male. Then another one walked in and was like, hey, you didn't have to clean my table to him. Then they locked eyes for an extended period of time and he replied, you owe me. They were frick-eyeing. Letha Wolf 89 says, multiple private meetings with only the coworker. Such Management 2411 says, a woman was hired at my job as a secretary. After 2 months of working there, my coworkers and I noticed she began going to lunch with our married boss. It started off as once or twice a week, and over time became every single day, sometimes for 2 to 4 hours. They would also just leave work early and not come back. From there, it was obvious that he was cheating on his wife. It became even more obvious when his wife started showing up to the office because she suspected something was going on. I quit that job, but I later found out that my boss got fired for having the affair when his wife had a meltdown at the office and tried to fight the secretary. The secretary didn't get fired, but one day my old boss stormed the office and told her to quit the job and leave with him. She never showed up to the job again after that. Edit, I forgot to mention that they would occasionally show up to work at the same time. I'm guessing he left his home early and went to her house for a quickie before work, lol. Fleshcrafter says, long lunches. Blue Yasindis Goz says, I actually caught my boss having an affair. They tried very hard to hide it. I never saw them in the same room or sit next to each other, but I caught them kissing. They were both married, and he was a self-described family man. He was a frick-eyeing asshole, and I hope his wife found out. Just Thoretta Snoop 13 says. These responses are both funny and validating, so thank you everyone. I'm a huge advocate for minding your business, which I plan to do. This whole situation is just quite uncomfortable in an office of only 5 people with a 20-year age gap and spouses on both sides. But alas. Randa Rambo 1 says. Work dinners involving the two of them. Mike Stalks Me Reddit says. Someone's nosy. Ben Diffreen D says. They appear at the apartment of that cowwalker when you are making out with the cowwalker's housemate. I once worked somewhere where the married GM, based on my office, was having an affair with a young female from customer service, based in an office in another city. I only found out because, while visiting that office, a hot fellow 20-something invited me back to her apartment after a work event. I wasn't her supervisor, had nothing to do with her or her work/department. We were both junior level. We were getting hot and heavy on the couch when suddenly her housemate enters the apartment with the GM from my office right behind her. They were clearly drunk and frisky and all he said was "oh shit. I'll have to explain this later." Then simply disappeared into the bedroom with the girl from customer service for some very loud sex. It was extra awkward as I sat just outside the office of the GM and had to see him every day after this. And I'd been to his home for Christmas parties, met his wife and kids several times. He never said a word to me about it. The woman I hooked up with told me that her housemate and the GM had been hooking up for over 2. Well, Frick says. By minding your own business. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.